obviously now in modern day is Albania, different cities in Albania, and it was just really incredible to kind of see how they constructed all of these architecture. I'll try to put a video in there so that you guys get a look. But what I understand is that this particular site or city was actually created or built by the Roman Empire, which is years later. Anyway, so the Illyrian civilization was actually was ruled by a tribe called RDA. I really feel like I'm really destroying that name, but I can't recall now how they pronounced this. Just so nobody gets offended, it's worth noting that the Illyrian people resided not only in Albania but also Kosovo, Montenegro, Bosnia, and Croatia. Basically, right across the coast of the Adriatic Sea. So the Illyrians was basically ruled by a king called Agron, or they had, a lot of leadership, but King Agron was the one that essentially extended his rule over other neighboring tribes as well. And after he passed away, his wife continued to expand the kingdom. But ultimately, the Illyrians lost as Rome declared war on the kingdom sometime in 229 BC, and the Illyrians were defeated in 227. Eventually, the Roman conquest, was so large in that area that the Romans split up into different administrative divisions. Now, the Romans ended up ruling this land for a very, very, very long time. And by then, Christianity had already arrived in the world, and that is when the timeline sort of went from before Christ to once Christ was born, AD. So there's a lot that happened between this period, but essentially between the 6th and 7th century, there are a lot of Slavic people who basically crossed the Danube. Danube is one of the second longest river in Europe. It connects a lot of different European countries together, so a lot of the Slavic people crossed this river, and through this, a lot of the races and ethnicities got mixed in. And that is kind of how Illyrian sort of started to, the pure Illyrian blood started to kind of get mixed up, and the last mention of Illyrians in the historical records, was in the 7th century. Anyway, time continued to pass, and we enter sometime in the 11th century, and that's kind of when Christianity became divided into Orthodox and Catholic. It's really interesting because the Illyrians were essentially pagans. They believed in a lot of different gods, and then Roman Empire brought Christianity to these lands. Eventually, that got split up into Orthodox and Catholic. During he basically banned all religion. He banned all religion, and he in fact killed people that practiced religion, whether that be Christianity or Islam. He killed a lot of the ulama and, priests and high status people in religious communities. And basically, he created a state that recognizes no religion in the 1976 Constitution. And he wanted a state that was based on atheistic views, a society that was, which adapted his scientific world outlook, and he wanted his people to have the same. Not only that, he also destroyed hundreds of mosques and libraries and manuscripts and materials and books and so on. And this also goes for churches. He ended up converting a lot of the churches into centers for basically young people to chill at. Preaching religion was, subject to 10 years of prison. So yeah, this was like the worst place to be for a Christian and a Muslim or anyone that was religious, really. I personally kind of find that interesting because I've heard a lot of arguments about how religion is kind of a negative for the lack of better word, a negative thing in society, wherein it's kind of an organized business, a tool that is used to control people and have power over them. But I find it interesting because if that is an argument that one is to hold against religions, then we should be just and fair and apply the same ideology and argument towards atheism, because atheism has also been used as a tool to control people, except it was done in the name of science, whereas religion is done in the name of fear of God. Regardless, both of them are in the end tools that are being used by these jerks in the world, regardless of who and which country. But these greedy politicians in the world, they will use literally anything to find a way to separate us from one another. Us average global citizens of the world rarely have any opinion, nor does our opinion hold any value or power, in the grand scheme of things. But let's not be unfair and say shit like religion is destroying society, because we can really say the same thing about atheism. But, with that being said, you need to know that I don't personally hold this view. I don't believe in that. I don't believe in one world view and that everybody needs to kind of follow that. No, but I'm just kind of playing devil's advocate here. Anyway, so after communism, there were a lot of revolutions that were driven by young people, mostly students in Albania. And yeah, man, eventually over time the communism collapsed, and today Albania is on its way to becoming a westernized nation. It is trying to be part of the EU, and from Serbians and Croats. That's what I personally feel. It could be completely wrong, but I think that could be one of the reasons. Albania, on the other hand, they don't, and you gotta bear in mind that during communism, people really had to hide their religion, so even those who genuinely converted had to keep everything low-key. So probably that generation didn't pass on anything to the newer, younger generation, and today Albanians don't know much, not only about Islam, but also Christianity. Although I went to this church where was it? In Shkodra, and I saw this little boy. It was a Catholic church, and I saw this little boy just kneeling, and praying, and he was just worshiping God, and I just found that so sweet. Yeah, but it was just really nice to see that little boy so dedicated to his faith in modern times where people just don't tend to care about anything except, social media, looking good online, attracting different likes and attracting likes, and then if you don't get a like, you delete the picture. Like really shallow and silly things. I am not judging people that use Instagram, but I'm really not for the idea that these platforms are kind of being misused by the younger generation, our kids, literally, and that in a way where they seek validation from their peers in society, where their identities are being constructed by the expectations that their peers hold for them. They're not exploring, they're not able to be free to figure out who they want to be. Rather, they're just reflections of people's opinions. You get me? I don't know. I really feel like that's what social media is doing, but that's an entirely different topic. So yeah, just seeing that little boy in church, it really lightened my heart, and I made a dua for him as well, and I hope that he always stays, he continues on the right path, and continues for what's good for him. But yeah, guys, that is the Albanian history. I'm sorry if I got some of the statements wrong. You gotta know that all of the stuff that I know is just from visiting the historical sites, doing tours, talking to the local people, reading the materials that they had at the historical sites. I haven't actually gone online to read anything. This was all entirely from the top of my head. So any Albanians out there, if I didn't do justice, my bad. Please go ahead and correct me, because I'm not trying to misinform anybody. But I personally really enjoy history, and for us as Muslims, history is really important because in the Quran, Allah constantly talks about the past, and that is one really important thing in Islam, which is the past. When Allah says, Surah Yasin, that those where He's put in shackles on people's necks, so there's a wall in front of them, behind them, and above them. A wall in front of them basically means they can't see the evidence present in front of them, and they reject that evidence and say that this is all created on its own. And then when God said that He's put a wall behind them, that means the history of mankind. That means they have no history to look back on. History is extremely important in Islam, and we're supposed to take notes from history and learn separate us from one another. But we can't fall for that. We just can't. We cannot be so ignorant. Like, really, we need to open our mind, and we shouldn't be shy or afraid that perhaps we'll have to compromise our beliefs in order to get to know somebody. No, be confident in who you are, and not be afraid to get to know somebody, and know that that person cannot convince you otherwise. And even if he did, that would be your own personal choice and decision. But we really don't need to be afraid of one another. Really, I really struggle sometimes as a Muslim, as a person with the ethnicity that I have, in certain areas in the world, because people hold a certain ideology about me when they look at me. Honestly, even when I went to Albania, I actually got quite a lot of stares, and I don't think it was in a bad way. It was more a curiosity kind of thing, because I would just smile at them and they would give me this beautiful smile back. And I've had people approach me and ask me, what it is that I'm wearing. I had these people from Czech Republic just start taking pictures of me, which was kind of awkward, but I didn't want to be rude. And they're just like, oh, you're so beautiful, and this and that. But I was literally gassed. Like, I was on the moon. I can't even lie. But I mean, they just found what I was wearing really beautiful, and they inquired about my hijab and stuff. So it was really nice to see people open up to learn. But if I hadn't smiled back, you know what I mean? If I had judged them and thought that they're judging me, then we would have never been able to have that sort of interaction. That's why it's just worth it to be more open towards other people, and screw these asshole politicians that are trying to control us, bro. They literally try to control our friendships. They try to control our relationships and our interactions and our friendships. I already said that, but our economic status. They try to control our likes and dislikes, and they literally try to control us as a person. And it's just like, no, F all of that. Like,